The silence in the house was a living thing. It lived in the dust motes spinning through the afternoon light, in the hollow tick of the grand oak clock, and in the spaces between Amelia's breaths at the kitchen sink. Her hands were submerged in lukewarm, soapy water. For 22 years, this silence had been her cocoon, her penance, her prison. It started the day her daughter Lily was buried. A tiny white casket lowered into the hard, unyielding earth of Willow Creek, Vermont. The vibrant, laughing woman Amelia had been buried with her. What remained was Amelia Reed. Silent, ghostly, the widow everyone pitied but no longer saw. Her husband, Richard, gave the silent teeth. He was respected, a partner at the town's only law firm, Reed & Bauer. His grief, he made sure everyone knew, was profound and dignified. He erected a marble headstone and gave annual donations to the Children's Hospital in Lily's name. In their colonial house, his grief became a performance. Solemn sighs, closed study doors. But behind those doors, where no one saw, his grief changed. It curdled into a cold, controlling contempt for Amelia, the living reminder of his loss. "You're moping again, Amelia," he'd say, his voice not loud but sharp as a surgical blade. "Do you think your silence brings her back? It's just selfish." He controlled the finances, the social calendar, and the narrative. She was the fragile one, the one who'd never recovered. And he, the long-suffering saint. Her voice, once known for singing silly songs to Lily and debating politics with college friends, had atrophied from disuse. It wasn't that she couldn't speak, it was that nothing she could say in his presence mattered. So she stopped. The silence became her only sanctuary, a fortress he couldn't fully breach. The storm that broke the silence began, as storms often do, with a whisper. It was a Tuesday. Richard was at a conference in Boston. The mail came, a pile of bland envelopes. Bills, charity solicitations, a medical statement. And then a plain, square envelope with no return address, addressed only to Amelia, in a delicate looping script. Her heart, a dormant creature in her chest, gave a single hard thump. No one sent her personal mail. Inside was a photograph. It was slightly faded, a Polaroid. A young Richard, hair darker, smile brighter, but undeniably him. He had his arm around a woman who was not Amelia. She was beautiful in a bold, careless way, with wild curls and a laugh that seemed to echo off the glossy paper. They were on a beach somewhere, squinting in the sun. On the back, in the same looping hand, was a date, June 1985, and a location, Santa Monica Pier. Amelia's breath caught. 1985. The summer before they met. She knew his history, or thought she did. A serious young law student, focused, dating a nice girl from his class who'd moved away. Not this sun-kissed, vibrant creature. The next envelope came 2 days later. Another photo. Richard and the woman, older now, were at a cozy-looking restaurant booth. His hand was covering hers on the table. The date on the back. August 1992. A cold trickle, like the first drop of ice water, traced Amelia's spine. 1992. The year after Lily was born. The year Amelia was drowning in postpartum bliss and exhaustion, believing her husband was working late to build a future for them. The silence in the house changed. It was no longer empty. It was charged, humming with a terrible, gathering energy. Amelia didn't speak, but her mind was a roar. She began to move through her days with a new purpose, her movements sharp where they had been languid. She started looking, really looking, for the first time in decades. She combed through his study when he was out, her fingers trembling but steady. She found nothing in the filing cabinets, the desk drawers. He was too careful. The third envelope was the lightning strike. It wasn't a photo, but a photocopy of a birth certificate. A baby girl. Name Rose Eleanor Delaney. Date of birth, March 15, 1993. Father Richard James Reed. Mother Eleanor Marie Delaney. March 1993. Lily would have been 2 years old. Amelia was baking banana bread, watching Sesame Street, living in a world that was already a lie. She stared at the name. Rose. A sister for Lily, who never knew she existed. A daughter for Richard, who had buried one and abandoned another. The silence was shattered. It didn't break with a scream, but with a low guttural sound that Amelia didn't recognize as her own voice. It was the sound of roots tearing free from deep, compacted earth. In that moment, the silent woman was washed away. What remained rising from the flood was pure, undiluted storm. The next envelope contained a phone number and a note. If you want to know the truth, call her. She's waiting. A friend. Amelia didn't hesitate. She drove to a payphone outside a dingy gas station on the edge of town, her hands steady on the wheel. The voice that answered was older, weary, but still carried the ghost of that careless laugh. Eleanor. A pause. Amelia. She knew. Of course she knew. I wondered if you'd call. I'm sorry. For all of it. Over an hour the story poured out. Eleanor had been the great, passionate love of Richard's youth, but she was unstable, a dreamer, not suitable wife material for a budding Vermont lawyer with political aspirations. He'd met Amelia, solid, stable, from a good family, and made his choice, but he never let Eleanor go. He kept her in an apartment in Burlington and visited her on his business trips. Rose was their secret. When Eleanor finally demanded more marriage recognition for their daughter, Richard cut her off. Not with violence, but with something colder, legal threats. He had powerful friends. He could make her disappear, have her declared an unfit mother. He sent money irregularly with the clear understanding it was hush money. Rose grew up knowing her father was a busy, important man who couldn't be with them. He has a gift, Eleanor said, her voice cracking, for making you feel like your love, your very existence, is an inconvenience. Problem he manages. He did it to me. I see from the papers he did it to you too. Why now? Amelia asked, her voice rough from years of disuse, foreign to her own ears. Rose is sick. She needs a bone marrow transplant. A familial match is her best chance. I couldn't ask him. He'd have me committed before he'd risk his reputation. But a half-sister, if Lily... She couldn't finish. Lily is gone, Amelia said, the words ash in her mouth. She died 22 years ago. The silence on the other end was profound. Then a shattered sob. Oh God. Amelia, I didn't know. The papers, he must have kept it out. Or I missed it. I'm so sorry. Amelia looked out at the greasy pavement of the gas station, the gray Vermont sky. The pity, the passivity of 2 decades, hardened into a diamond core of fury. Richard hadn't just silenced her. He had compartmentalized his entire life, discarding people when they ceased to be useful. He had a daughter, a living, breathing daughter who needed help, and he had left her to suffer, just as he had left Amelia to wither in her grief. Give me your address, Eleanor, Amelia said, her tone leaving no room for argument. And Rose's medical information. All of it. The storm had made landfall. The next phase was reconnaissance. Amelia, the woman who hadn't balanced a checkbook in 20 years, became a strategist. She used the public library computers to learn about offshore accounts, shell companies, and forensic accounting. She found the keys to Richard's safety deposit box tucked in his golf bag, a place he thought she'd never go. Inside, she found the proof: statements from a bank in the Cayman Islands, deeds to a condo in Burlington in Eleanor's name, bought for a song, a payoff, and a sealed envelope containing a single recent photo of a young woman with Richard's eyes and Eleanor's wild hair, Rose. He'd been watching her from a distance all this time. She hired a private investigator in Boston with cash she slowly, carefully siphoned from the grocery money over months. Silas was a grizzled ex-cop who listened to her story without a hint of pity, only a grim professional interest. He's a slick one, your husband, Silas said. But slick guys get cocky. They think no one's brave enough to look. Silas found more. A secret email account, communications with a dubious clinic in Switzerland about estate planning, a potential euthanasia route for a burdensome wife, Amelia wondered, and evidence of insider trading that had financed his offshore nest egg. Richard wasn't just a controlling husband. He was a crooked lawyer, a fraud. His entire life was a meticulously crafted fiction. Amelia absorbed it all, her fury cooling into a glacial, focused resolve. Revenge wasn't about screaming or confrontation. It was about exposure. It was about taking the narrative he had so carefully controlled and burning it to the ground. She reached out to Rose. The girl, no, the woman, 30 years old, was wary, scared, but desperately hopeful. They met in a quiet Boston cafe. Rose was pale from her illness, but her eyes were fierce and intelligent. He sent a card every birthday, she said, stirring her tea. With a $100 bill. Like I was a distant niece. My mother told me to be grateful. I just felt cheap. You are not cheap, Amelia said, and the force in her voice made Rose look up. You are his greatest failure, and we are going to make him answer for it. The plan coalesced. It would happen at the Willow Creek Annual Founders Gala, the most pompous event of the Vermont social calendar. Richard was to be given the Pillar of the Community award. It was his pinnacle, the ultimate validation of his carefully constructed persona. The night of the gala, Amelia dressed with meticulous care. She chose a simple, elegant black gown she hadn't worn in years. She looked at herself in the mirror. A woman in her late 50s, hair streaked with silver, lines of sorrow etched around her eyes. But her eyes themselves, for the first time in decades, were alive with a clear, ferocious light. You look appropriate, Richard said, barely glancing at her as they got into the town car. He was rehearsing his acceptance speech under his breath. Thank you, Richard, Amelia said. Her voice was calm, clear. He looked at her, slightly startled. She hadn't initiated a conversation in years. The ballroom of the Willow Creek Inn was a swirl of sequins, forced laughter, and the cloying scent of peonies. Everyone was there. The mayor, the judge, the other partners, their wives, looking at Amelia with practiced, sympathetic smiles. She smiled back, a new sharp smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The dinner dragged. Speeches were made. Finally, the mayor took the podium. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. A man who embodies the spirit of Willow Creek, a devoted husband, a pillar of the legal community. Richard Reed. Applause erupted. Richard rose, straightening his tuxedo, and gave Amelia a perfunctory pat on the shoulder as he walked to the stage. He stood at the podium, beaming, soaking in the adulation. Thank you all. This is truly an honor, he began. Amelia stood up. She didn't shout. She simply walked with a deliberate, unhurried pace toward the side of the stage. A few people noticed, their smiles turning confused. Richard saw her, and a flicker of annoyance crossed his face. He thought she was having one of her spells. She reached the AV technician, a young kid she'd paid Silas to bribe weeks ago. She gave a slight nod. Richard was mid-sentence. And of course, none of this would be possible without the support of my beloved wife, Amelia, whose strength in the face of our shared tragedy has been an inspiration. The giant screen behind him, which had been displaying a slideshow of his charitable works, flickered. His face was replaced by a scanned image of the birth certificate. Rose Eleanor Delaney. Father Richard James Reed. The crowd gasped. Richard froze, his mouth open. The image changed to the beach photo with Eleanor. Then the restaurant photo. Then the Cayman Island bank statements highlighted. Then the emails about the Swiss clinic. Then a recent photo of Rose, looking ill but brave, her medical diagnosis clearly visible on a chart beside her. A deafening silence fell over the ballroom. All eyes were glued to the screen, then to Richard, whose face had drained of all color, then to Amelia, who had now walked to the foot of the stage. He stared at her, his eyes wide with a mixture of horror and utter incomprehension. This was his silent wife, his ghost. He managed the problem. Amelia took the small, wireless microphone the AV kid handed her. She turned to face the crowd, 300 of the most important people in their world. She could see the judge staring, his fork suspended in midair. She saw the mayor's wife's hand fly to her mouth. She spoke, and her voice, amplified, was low, clear, and carried the weight of 2 decades of silence. My name is Amelia Reed. For 22 years I have been silent. I was silent through my grief for my daughter Lily. I was silent through my husband's meticulous campaign to make me a non-person in my own home. I was silent because he convinced me, and perhaps convinced you, that I had nothing left to say. She paused, letting the words hang in the thick air. But silence can be a cocoon. And tonight, I am breaking out of mine to introduce you to the Real Richard Reed. The man who, while I mourned our child, had a secret second family. The man who fathered a daughter, Rose, and abandoned her to poverty and illness. The man who, as you can see, has been stealing from clients, hiding money offshore, and exploring ways to be rid of a wife who had become inconvenient. She turned to look at him. He was gripping the podium, knuckles white, his body trembling with rage and shock. "This pillar of the community," she continued, her voice gaining strength, ringing through the hall, "is a fraud, a manipulator, a man who uses the law not to serve justice, but to serve himself and destroy anyone who stands in his way. He has a living daughter who needs a bone marrow transplant. He has known for a year and has done nothing. That is not grief. That is sociopathy." She then did something she hadn't planned. She looked directly into the crowd at the judge. "Your Honor, the evidence you've just seen, along with sworn affidavits from Eleanor Delaney, medical records for Rose Reed, and a full dossier of his financial crimes, has been delivered to the District Attorney's Office, the State Bar Association, and the IRS. It is sitting on your desk as well." She dropped the microphone. It hit the polished floor with a deafening thud that echoed in the utter stillness. Then chaos. Flashbulbs went off, reporters, tipped off by Silas, surged forward. People shouted. The mayor scrambled to the podium, sputtering into a dead mic. Richard finally found his voice, a strangled, "This is lies. She's insane. Can't you see she's unwell?" But no one was listening. They were too busy looking at the damning proof still cycling on the screen behind him. Amelia didn't stay to watch the unraveling. She walked head high through the parting crowd, a path clearing for her as if by magic. She didn't look back. She stepped out into the cool Vermont night, the sound of scandalized uproar fading behind the heavy doors. The storm had passed. It had left devastation in its wake, but it was a cleansing devastation. In the months that followed, the fallout was swift and merciless. Richard was arrested on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and bigamy. His marriage to Amelia, it turned out, was likely invalid due to his ongoing commitment to Eleanor, which constituted a common-law marriage in the eyes of the state. The state bar disbarred him. He was ruined socially, financially, and professionally. Amelia, however, was just beginning. She sold the house on Maple Drive. She granted Eleanor a generous settlement from the frozen assets, enough for Rose's treatment and their security. Thankfully, a donor was found for Rose, not a familial match but a viable one. Amelia visited her often in Boston, a quiet, steady presence. They weren't mother and daughter, but they were something new, allies, survivors of the same war. Amelia used her share of what was left to start Lily's Voice, a nonprofit that provided legal and counseling services for women in coercively controlling relationships. She became a quiet but powerful advocate, using her own story not for sympathy, but as a weapon to change laws and perceptions. One afternoon, she was sitting in her sunny, small apartment in Burlington, going over grant proposals. A news alert popped up on her tablet. It was a short piece from a local paper in a cheap Florida town. Disgraced former Vermont lawyer cited in bar fight. There was a blurry photo of Richard, looking bloated and old, arguing with a much younger man. He was a ghost of the man he'd been, haunting the edges of a life that had no use for him. Amelia felt nothing. No vindication, no pity. Just a quiet, solid peace. She closed the browser and looked out at Lake Champlain, sparkling under the vast open sky. The silent woman was gone forever. She had been a vessel, waiting to be filled with a tempest. And once that storm had finished its work, scouring away the lies and the pain, what remained was simply a woman who had found her voice again. And she would never let it be silenced. Thank you for journeying into the heart of the storm with us. This was a story about the quiet ones, the ones who are overlooked, and the immense power that can gather in the depths of silence. If this tale of resilience and retribution resonated with you, if you believe in the strength found in reclaiming one's own narrative, then do us a favor. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story of secrets unveiled and strength rediscovered. In the comments below, let us know. What did you think of Amelia's final move? Was it justice or vengeance or both? We read every single one. Until next time, remember, even the quietest calm can hide the most powerful storm. Stay curious. Stay strong.